All right, Ani, bonjour, everyone. Appreciate you taking time this evening to join us. And yeah, a little bit about myself. Odaman Queen Dishinkas, Magizi and Dodum, Waganasing Odawa, uh, uh, Strawberry Woman, and I am Eagle Clan. So I always like to say if I'm hanging out in Indian country, whether it's in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Canada, and I meet a fellow individual who also has Eagle Clan. I like to say, your family, your cousin, we are related in some way, shape, or form because of our connection through our clan. And we are here in the land of the Crooked Tree, Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. So what you'll see before you is so my background is in social work, and I work for MSU Extension. I have been there for almost 16 years, and I work with tribes across Indian country here in Michigan, sometimes Wisconsin, Minnesota, to talk about tribal governance, facilitation, community development. In addition, my other hat is as an elected official here at LTB as the secretary for tribal council. So yeah, it's great to be able to work from home and work with our community in public service capacity. But what I will also share with you is I have a few other rules, and that is within my family. I have learned from my mom, a little bit from my grandma, but predominantly my mom, and through conversations that I've heard growing up about wreaths, about caring for our loved ones who have walked on, or other terms would be have died in this realm but passed on to the next realm of living. And you might have heard many folks, handful of folks, talk about not only do we care for those here on this plane and our relatives, four-legged, our birds and other items, the land around us, but we also care for our loved ones who have again walked on into the next life. So this evening, I'll share with you a little bit of what I was taught about making crowns. You may also hear the term wreaths. You also, and I don't have a photo of this, but I will try and locate one. We also use little bouquets, little nosegays. So I will talk a little bit more about that later. So these are my teachings within my family. And we always say, if you talk with others in our community, you may hear another teaching, another story. But again, this is from my family, and my family comes from Cross Village and some from Sheboygan, but predominantly both sides of my family are from Cross Village. And yeah, so actually a few weeks ago is when we put out our crowns for this year. All right. So as Odawa, we've continued to experience change, right? We are not strangers to change in this land, in this country. And over the years, we've had to adapt. We've had to adapt to the building of towns, of schools, of new economies, of becoming US citizens. But whenever possible, we as Odawa have continued to blend, find ways to share our culture, to continue practicing our traditions. And whenever possible, we have had the opportunity to blend our culture with American practices. What is most important, though, is blending that with American culture, with Catholicism, with organized religion, has created the opportunity for many of for our cultures and tradition to continue living, if you will. And so what you see before you are a few individuals who are visiting graves, visiting cemeteries, and are placing their wreaths before them. So Odawa Catholics, and as I mentioned, incorporated cultural beliefs, customs, and meanings into traditional feasts, into culture traditions of traditional feasts, and other ceremonies into the Catholic calendar. And so there are a handful of presenters in the area who have spoke to assimilation policies, who have spoke to the forced change in our community and the need for many of our traditions and language to go underground. Well, as I mentioned earlier, you also have a variety of beliefs that were able to be, again, integrated into majority dominant society and the Catholic Church's calendar. And again, that is aligned with, as we'll talk about, the passing of an individual into the afterlife, honoring their life, honoring their time here, and also taking care of them once they have walked on. And so this is one of the cemeteries. I'll have a handful of images from Cross Village, and this is one of them that you'll see that still exists in Cross Village. But here's another image of our Cross Village cemeteries, and you'll notice again all of the different wreaths that are hanging there that are included and placed each year. And this image, as noted, was taken in 1895. And this shows, and many of you if you've had a chance to go to Cross Village, you might recognize Father Wycamp. So where Father Wycamp's cemetery, where his graveyard is, that's where you see the crosses here. So many of them are not marked at this point. Many of them are not, you won't see crosses, you don't see any nameplates, but know that that cemetery within that chained link area, and some also say beyond that area, are where many of our family members lie. And in fact, that's where many of my family members lie, but it's difficult to locate where our folks are, given that many of the records burned in Cross Village, the church records of those cemeteries. And so not only is Cross Village one of our main cemeteries, but St. Ignatius and Goodhart. You'll also find individuals who place wreaths at the cemetery here in Harbor Springs. What I will say is that this is not per se unique to our area. I do know of others who may not necessarily create wreaths, but do have feasts and ceremonies to celebrate our loved ones who have passed into the next realm of being. And so for us here, though, when we had a person who walked on or died, ceremonies were often held. There were often joyous times, right? Celebrating a person whose life had existed here, and again, their passage into the afterlife. And you'll typically see feasts or ghost suppers around this time of year. So November 1st is an important date, though. In my teachings, you are to have all your wreaths made and placed on the cemeteries before November 1st. So in my family, we start making wreaths. I started making them, what are we in, November, October? So probably at the end of August. You know, Mom and I always have a goal of making them throughout the year so we don't have to stress. But each year that doesn't, for some odd reason, come to pass. And so we did those, start making them in September, end of August, and we had to make around 25 or so wreaths. And we usually place them on October 30th or 31st at each of our grave sites of our relatives. And yeah, we make sure they're out. And as many of us know, November 1st is the All Saints Day with the Catholic calendar. And so that's a very important date. What's also important to note, though, is, how do I say this? So when we make wreaths, when we make our flowers, we're thinking of, again, our loved ones who have walked on. But when you place the wreaths on their grave, on the crosses, however you're able to have them there, on November 1st, you know, one of the stories that we have is Many November 1st, our loved ones are waiting to be fed, are excited to be fed, to be honored at this time of year. And each of our folks who have a wreath have it placed on their head. That's why you'll often hear crowns used, right? So the image and teaching is our loved ones are in the afterlife together, knowing that we're thinking of them and they're marching, right? They are sharing, they're showing their crowns and their little bouquets with each other, letting them each other know that they're being thought of and cared for. And you also have, though, the teaching that the individuals who don't have crowns or wreaths or little bouquets, it's a sad day. It's a sad day for our folks. And so, in talking with mom over the years, we've really tried to find our relatives in the cemetery. So, you know, it it really it's important for me to care for our folks. And I have a hard time thinking about our folks who don't have their wreaths or their crowns or their little bouquets to march to share with everyone else their beautiful flowers and the wreaths that their loved ones made. So, as I said, I've been researching where our folks are to the best of my ability, and we make 25 crowns. There's also other families too that have their own teachings around cemeteries. This is Oak Drive. If any of you have an opportunity to drive by Oak Drive, we have archives and records, our Youth Conservation Corps who help maintain this cemetery. It is a very old cemetery, but you'll see beautiful wreaths on these crosses as well. Just colorful and vibrant. And these are my relatives who, at least four of them that I think about when I make my wreaths. This is on the left is my Aunt Mary, my Uncle Tony, and then my Grandma Dubell, Alice, um, and my grandpa. And so all these individuals are in Cross Village and they have their wreaths. So when November 1st came, they were able to share with each other. And so that this tradition was passed to me, my auntie and my cousins also engage in this at times, but we felt that it was important to share this with my nephews. So this is my oldest nephew, Jason. And right now he's away at college, but as often as he can, goes with us to place the wreaths on a relative's site. And so there's my mother and my nephew at Aunt Anna or at Aunt Mary's and Uncle Tony's grave, placing our wreaths. And you'll notice a bag behind us. We removed the wreaths, and you're supposed to burn them so you make fresh ones for the coming year. And I'll talk a little bit more about the structure of the wreaths, but it's important to take time to share these traditions with our next generation. And so these are wreaths from this year that we made. I can find another image, but you'll notice that they're different colors. At times they're different sizes. You'll notice different ribbons or crepe paper streamers that we place on them, and they're beautiful. They are, again, created with different size flowers, different colors. And for us, colors don't, when I make one for my father who walked on almost 10 years ago now, I think about his personality, what he loved, what he enjoyed, the colors that he wore, that he, looked handsome in. And so we try to make wreaths that match. I hope that makes sense. For those that we were able to know and love and care for here. But as you can see, they range in size, color. Color can matter, again, if that's part of your family's tradition, but we try to make them beautiful. And this is my godfather. Nope, not my godfather. This is Mary O'Damon, Benny and Mary O'Damon. So this is a couple generations before me. And you'll see behind us too, we'll place them there. But um, yeah, we try to make sure that they're beautiful as possible. So how to make the wreaths. So I talked a little bit about where they're placed, what cemeteries they're placed in, at least for my family, who places them. This year, my brother helped place them and learn where they're located. We often use crepe paper, and I will say there are different types of crepe paper that we use. There's all sorts, as many of us know, but we have a preference of the very heavier, pliable type, durable type of crepe paper, and they make the most beautiful leaves and flowers. But there's a whole slew, and for us, it doesn't per se matter what crepe paper you use. Um, it's up to your preference. The shape of the flowers, too, you can make them as integral as you like, as dynamic or as simple as you like. And we've made all types of flowers, but they're all beautiful. And so there's a couple of example. There's an example of different flower petals, if you will, and different flowers that are made. Um, and so the flowers, you have crepe paper, and you'll notice there's little pipe cleaners. We cut the petals separately, and then you create your little flower, and we wrap wire around them. And that's your stem. And then you can wrap the green tape around to make them even prettier. But you make sure that you have enough of your wire or pipe cleaner to wrap around the wreath. And so here is a wreath. And so over the years, I learned that, well, there are folks who use grapevines. There are folks who use different types of trees, different types of vines to wrap their wreaths to make them. However, I will also say that I learned from my mom and grandma that you use what you have, right? So I've seen folks use coat hangers. I've seen folks use embroidery hoops to make these wreaths. We've often used grapevine, but we've gotten away from that over the years. I'm not sure why. But so you have your wreath, and we use cloth, oftentimes white cloth, and wrap the wreath, as you'll see here. And then you'll add your flower, again, as you'll see here with the individual on their left hand, and then you'll wrap white cloth around that, to which will, again, give you a wreath. And so this one was made by my partner, Eric Hemingway, his Aunt Mary. And she, for me, is known for making beautiful, exquisite flowers for her wreaths and their family's wreath over the years. And so you can see in this photo too, that the flowers are wrapped around the wreath. And from that point, we do add white cloth around it. So yeah, so we make, as I said, 24 of these at least. And this is a very important time. And so this was from a number of years back, but we have crown making workshops. We have get-togethers for folks to make crowns together. It's a joyous time. It's a fun time. You get to tell stories. You get to hear different traditions. And most importantly, it's a time to reflect and think of your loved ones in the afterlife. So following crown and wreath making, we get into our ghost supper time, which you'll see advertised in many of our tribal newsletter, different homes that will be open to hosting folks to come eat and feed their loved ones in the afterlife. And our community ghost supper or our family ghost supper is coming up, and we think about our loved ones and the food that they enjoyed. And so I'll talk about my dad. He loved his goodies. He loved his goodies. He loved his meat and potatoes and sometimes hot dogs. And so some of the food we'll be making is his favorite food, right? And so we'll think of our aunties and our uncles and friends and others and foods that they enjoyed. And so we'll serve that for us to eat, and then we will share that with anyone who comes to the home, and it's to our home, and it's open. So whoever arrives, we will feed, and that's a way of also honoring those individuals' loved ones as well. So then we'll put food out, and we will provide engage in our ceremony, and our loved ones will be fed for at that time. So they'll have their wreaths, their bouquets, and their food to know that they're loved and they'll be sustained until our next feast and time to honor them. And sometimes you get little hints if you're thinking about a person, and um, you'll get little hints about what they enjoyed or what colors they like. It's a deeper connection. It's a little difficult to put words to it, but it's a beautiful way to honor folks. Um, And then they're there for the year. And when you come back, you remove them. You're supposed to burn them. Sometimes we unwrap the hoops and reuse them. I've gotten permission from my elders to do so. But yeah. So that's a little bit about our wreath making. Yeah. So any questions, comments? I hope that was interesting and helpful.
Thanks, thanks, Emily. Let me unpin you here so that I can see. There we are. So I had a couple of questions, clarification that I think other people might enjoy. So when you, I thought I remembered hearing something about that the crowns are like an invitation to the ghost supper for those who have passed. Is that something that's true, or is it more of what you were saying that on November 1st they all get together, in the afterlife and are showing off, their wreaths?
So I've heard different teachings. And so a part of the story is various community members have had dreams. And so in my family, my elders have had dreams of our loved ones marching on that day with beautiful wreaths and beautiful bouquets to hold. Little babies have had their little bouquets to hold. But other families, I think I have heard that from a couple of our families that that's one of the teachings too. So it's a little different for each, but you'll see the core theme of creating wreaths, having ghost supper, having those feasts to celebrate and think of our loved ones. So it's a both and. Yep.
And for those who might not be familiar with Ghost Supper itself, the way that you're feeding the ancestors is through fire, correct? Is that
Yep.
right?
Yep. So you always have an individual. So ours is coming up, and what we do is we get our different foods and we have our core meal. Oftentimes it's fish. You'll see fry bread or biscuits, wild rice, somanomen, uh, what else? Corn soup, hominy soup. We often have wild games, so we'll have duck, we'll have elk. Sometimes we'll have venison, sometimes we'll have moose. Sometimes folks will bring goulash or green bean casserole, and then there'll be a plethora of pies and cake. And I remember Eric's aunt, me and actually, I think your husband, Beth, we would argue who's going to get one of the banana cream pies, coconut cream pies. And so you have great fun once in a while hiding a piece, so you get one later on. Um, but before all that, you have an individual who starts the fire. And yes, and in many of our ceremonies, fire is our communicator to the next realm, the afterlife, or to our helpers. Um, to honor our items. So fire is very key. We were just having that conversation too at Tribal Council about fire and how over the years you have firefighters, you have folks who put out fires. Here, there's a relationship to fire, and not only do we use it to communicate, but you also use fire to, and it's another conversation for another day, but you use fire to uh, rekindle the soil, rekindle, we'll say berry patches. So fire has been used in multiple ways in our community, and it is respected and important. So that is a key element to our ceremonies as well. Yep.
So we have a question here. Where do the wreath crowns come from? Was the wreath making practiced before it was associated with Catholicism, before the French Catholics arrived? How far back does that tradition go?
Well, the tradition of feasting and caring for our loved ones goes back time immemorial, right? You'll hear Eric Hemingway talk at length about our loved ones being buried along the shore. And when we would move, we would take our loved ones with us if we had to relocate. So we've always cared for our relatives who've walked on. Wreaths came a little bit later, to my knowledge. But exactly when, I'm not sure. As I shared, we had our individuals in our family who dreamt of having to do this. Um, so in my mind, it correlates a little, probably around the time when we had to find ways to disguise our ceremonies, disguise our teachings to ensure we can continue honoring in a way that would fit our communities around us. But as to when, that's a that's a tough one for me to find an exact time frame.
Yeah, I think that you're onto something there with, historically it's likely to have been a practice that evolves as the Odawa are being forced to change, what they do and how they do it. And I think that, wreaths and placing flowers on graves is a very, Christian, Catholic, American tradition. And so some of those pictures you showed, the 1870s, 1860s, certainly, prior to that, even, I would think.
Yep. Well, and it does pose some difficulties that you find Catholic cemeteries in particular have certain rules that you cannot place anything on graves, such as wreaths or flowers. And so most recently, well, one place where my great auntie is laid to rest, you're not supposed to place anything on their grave. So thankfully, when we do, uh, there hasn't been anyone from that area who's removed them. We are very respectful to keep things looking nice, of course, for our grave sites. But um, I think that's a conversation also for another day, is that intersection of belief systems. And then when it comes to those different parameters and guidelines at cemeteries or graves, and how at times they are congruent and sometimes they are in a conflict, and how to create that best balance to continue being able to engage in our traditional practices. So, good questions.
Yeah, there's a couple other ones on here. First was how long are they up? When are they removed? And is it okay to place them on a non-relative to honor them? I imagine when you go to place those for your relatives, there are probably graves next to it that are native that are maybe don't have them. Do you?
Mm. And again, great question. So we keep them up year round. So once they're placed, they're up until the next time you make them and have to put new ones on. So they're there again year round. And the image of, let's see, let me pull it up. Here it is. So my grandma and my great aunt are Odawa, and my grandpa and my great uncle are not. However, we still place wreaths on their grave. They are our loved ones and they're together in the afterlife, and so we want to be sure to feed and honor them as as a unit, right? So when it comes to other families and sites that grave sites that you find, that can be a little that can be a little you want to make sure that we're not overstepping on families who either are making them to put them out or may not necessarily want them placed on their cemetery. So that's oftentimes a fine line. And like I said, recently I found some new sites for my family on my dad's side, and we had never made wreaths for them. And so I'll probably reach out to my cousins and just touch base with them just to make sure I'm not overstepping or they have other plans for putting wreaths out. Maybe I missed it, but and some of those old cemeteries or grave sites, I suppose you could, but again, just want to be careful. Make sure that's something supported by the family if at all possible.
And then I have another question here that's about how pretty much all of the markers just seem to be white crosses, that there's not a lot of, like permanent stone markers sometimes. Um, do you do you replace the crosses what is this? Do you replace the crosses every year as well or paint them or um yeah.
We, we probably ought to. uh yeah, we I would like to get into that practice of painting them each year. Well, and let me back up to this too. And so there's other ceremonies that you would in fact go into the cemeteries and clean, right? There are certain times a year that all the community members would go out, clean up the grave sites, trim up the grass, paint the crosses, make sure they're standing up straight. And so, ideally that would be a year-round activity for us is to continue maintaining and caring for those sites. So yeah, to your question, yes. Does it happen all the time? No. Uh, However, that would be ideal. And over the years, actually, LTB, Archives and Records, has provided white crosses for folks and families to place on cemeteries or to replace old crosses too. So yeah, so you'll often see typically our folks with white crosses. One of my great uncles though doesn't there's a family, I don't know what you call it, a family plot, right? And that's outlined and with our family name, but there aren't any crosses within it. And so, we improvised and just hung a wreath on the stone with the name on it. I don't know the name of it. And so we hang it there with a rock to hold it on there. So our folks will have a wreath there. I don't know who else is there, but we know my great uncle is there. So sometimes you have to improvise given how old some of them are. But yeah, for my dad's, we clean it, we trim it up. Grandpa's, we need to do grandpa's pretty soon on my dad's side. But yeah.
Is there a reason that they're mostly white crosses and that there's not a lot of like stones?
Yes, there is. And there is, Beth. I'll have to get back to you on that. There's a reason why you typically have white crosses. Yep. There is. I can't remember, but there is. So I'll have to get back to you on that one.
When I send the recording out, I'll include an addendum. Uh,
Yeah. We'll be like part two.
I noticed it on my cemetery tours recently that there
Yep.
really just weren't a lot of, and I wasn't sure if it was just a price thing that a marble marker is super expensive or if it was more of a, because I know there are some cemeteries on like I don't know if it's Beaver Island or one of the islands that have
Yep.
wooden spirit houses instead of crosses.
Yep.
And so, yeah.
So that's another teaching. And you notice spirit houses used, I've seen them at Bay Mills, I've seen them in the UP at Keweenaw Bay. So spirit houses are another way that you would, in fact, bury your deceased, with a spirit house. I haven't seen many, if at all, here in Odawa territory, but in other Anishinaabe territories, that is a practice. Yep. And you don't remove the spirit boxes, so I don't want to talk too much about that teaching as it's not mine. What I will say is, to my knowledge, they are there, and as they fall into, I won't say as they erode, you don't replace them. That is how they're meant to be.
Gotcha.
So, yep.
Um, Another quick question. Do you spray the crepe paper with some sort of water repellent spray to make it last for the whole year? Or
Nope.
is it meant to fade?
Yep. Yep. We don't, nope, we don't spray them. Um, you just make sure they're there, that they're able to, sometimes they fall off and you can replace them, hang them back up, or sometimes people will put them on the top of the cross. But no, we don't spray them or anything. Yep.
Okay, I'm just looking to see if we have any other last minute questions here. If you do have a question, please feel free to start typing before we wrap up. And I will just say I was struck by what you said about tying the tradition to All Saints' Day because I believe I had heard that Ghost Supper was um, originally in the summer,
Yep.
not in November. Is that the
Yep.
case?
Yep. Spring, summer. Yep. So when renewal happens, right? So spring, summer is often a time for renewal, for caring for the everything is waking up, everything is coming anew. And so that would be a time to feast and care for them at that time. But again, with the change and having to assimilate some of the teachings to continue going, um, they married it to All Saints Day. Yep. Um, so I do want to say, and if anyone has a chance to read James McClurkin's book, A Visual Culture, The Way It Happened, A Visual Culture History of Little Traverse Bay Bands. Someone asked about colors, and our elders who helped put this book together, who Jim had interviewed, shared that the elaborate feast for the dead was moved to November 1st, All Saints' Day. For this holiday, women and girls made wreaths of paper flowers and bright streamers, and in the morning, the wreaths were hung on the cross grave markers. The Odawa believed that the dead wore the bright wreaths in the afterworld. So on the evening of November 1st, families held ghost suppers for their dead. As was tradition, they set a place for the departed. Some families left food on the table all night so the deceased could eat. Others took the food to the graveyard. Today, ghost suppers are still prepared and eaten in Waganaksin communities. So again, we actually do not take food to the graveyard, but that was one of the teachings. So that goes to make the point that things change over time, and those narratives and traditions do too.
Yeah, and I didn't realize sort of how individual it is, but now that you've said it, it makes complete sense to me because, I don't celebrate Christmas the same way that everyone else does. We have a tradition in my family that we open presents on Christmas Eve and then we do this. And so it's really interesting to hear about your family's traditions and specifically, and that was really um it's been really lovely to hear about that from you. Oh, can you repeat the book title, please? Yes, and I'll hold it up too. I'll stop blurring my background here for a second and hold up the book. So it's called The Way It Happened, by James McClurkin. It's a really fantastic book. We have copies in our archives at the History Museum. We don't sell them, of course, but we do have them. It's a fantastic book. And then There is another question. Do both men and women take part in making and placing the wreaths? I know you said you and your mom make them, but is it like a gendered thing or does it not really matter?
From what I've experienced, it's been often the individuals who identify as females. That's not to say, I mean, none of my teachings has there been an issue. There's no gender per se specific teaching that I know of. It's just, as we also heard in the book, that it's often been women, females in the family who've made them and placed them. But yeah, like I said, my brother helps, my nephew helps. And well, and I think of this practically too. Like in my family, we don't have any young women who are being taught. We've had a lot of boys in the family. So to continue, the the nephews are gonna they gotta learn and step up and do this when I not able to do it or when I walk on. So sometimes it's just practicality and you do what you have to do to keep it going. So, yep.
That makes a lot of sense. Let's see. I think that was the last question. I'll give it another quick second, but that does take us to 45 minutes, so that's pretty perfect timing, actually. Let's see, just some comments. Miigwech, Emily. That was lovely. It was great to hear about your experience and your family's experience, and to learn a little bit more about why we see these wreaths showing up specifically in our local cemeteries.
Hmm.
Um, oh, I had a question. Where's Oak Drive? Is that Cross Village?
It is. Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay. I
Yep.
just haven't explored enough, apparently.
Oh yeah, that's old cemetery. So Eric, our elders are buried there. We still have a few folks who've been buried there over the years. Okay, so I will say it is pretty cool when you get a chance to visit the cemeteries and you get to know our Odawa families. Like you'll see different families and different, villages, right? Our villages. And so my family, Cross Village, you'll see a lot of Naganash, showmen in the village. You'll see some here in Harbor. Wemigwas you'll see here in Harbor. So it's to me it's pretty exciting to see our family names in various places and our folks caring for them. So
Well, thank you very much for sharing this with us, for taking the time to come out and chat with us about this. A few more thank yous in the chat. And to everyone that joined us tonight on this Zoom call, we really appreciate you being here and supporting the programs of the Historical Society so that we can have great presentations like this. If you're interested in any of our upcoming programs, please visit our website, harborspringshistory.org, go to the events page and sign up. We are also on Facebook and on Instagram. And I will let you know just one more time, our YouTube page, the link is up earlier in the chat so that you can see some of the other lectures that we've had. And this lecture itself will also be up on our YouTube page once I can get it edited and posted. So you can come back and rewatch it if you'd like to. So thank you again so much, Emily, and thank you so much, viewers, for being a part of this. And we hope to talk to you all again very soon. Have a
thank
great
you
night,
for taking
everybody.
time tonight. I appreciate you listening and spending time with me this evening. It means a lot. So appreciate it. Thanks, Beth.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.